The reflection staring back at Ilara from the polished lab surface showed a face considered beautiful by most Vexillian standards. Iridescent blue-tinged skin, large almond-shaped eyes with silver irises, and delicate ridges where humans might have eyebrows. Yet in Vexillian society, her appearance was merely decorative packaging for what they considered a fundamentally worthless being. Specimen 47B requires cataloging, Ilara. Since you're only capable of assisting, perhaps you can handle that without error. Administrator Corval didn't bother looking up from his holographic display as he issued the command, his teal skin darkening slightly at the temples, a Vexillian sign of disdain. Yes, Administrator. Ilara's voice remained neutral, a skill perfected over years of similar interactions. Her fingers, 4 on each hand just like all Vexillians, moved gracefully over the specimen container. The Nexus Interspecies Research Station orbited a neutral planet at the convergence of 3 major galactic territories. Here, scientists from dozens of species collaborated on projects ranging from medicine to xenobiology. Ilara had earned her position through brilliance and determination, qualities that would have made her celebrated if not for the genetic scan performed on her 20th birth cycle. 0 reproductive value, the Genetic Council had declared with clinical finality. A rare mutation in her reproductive genome meant Ilara could never contribute to the carefully managed Vexillian bloodlines. In a society where genetic contribution was the ultimate measure of worth, she became instantly expendable, a pretty relic useful only for menial tasks. The lab doors slid open with a soft hiss, and Dr. Callum Reeves entered, his tall human frame requiring him to duck slightly through the Vexillian-designed doorway. Unlike most humans with their varied skin tones, Callum's was a rich brown, his dark curly hair kept short, and his eyes a striking green that always seemed to notice everything. "Good morning, Administrator Corval," he said pleasantly, before turning to Ilara with the same respectful nod. "And good morning to you, Dr. Veris." Corval's head ridge flared in annoyance at Callum's insistence on using Ilara's earned title rather than just her name, a subtle human rebellion against Vexillian hierarchy that never failed to irritate the administrator. "The human persistence in misapplying titles remains curious," Corval remarked coldly. "I have prepared the authorization for today's genetic sampling sequence. You may proceed when ready." With that, he exited the lab, leaving a lingering chill in his wake. Once the doors closed, Callum's professional smile softened into something more genuine. "One day, I'm going to understand how someone so brilliant can simultaneously be so narrow-minded." "It's not narrow-mindedness from his perspective," Ilara replied, moving specimens into the analyzer with practiced precision. "It's cultural certainty. For 8,000 years, Vexillian society has thrived through genetic optimization. And yet here you are, supposedly unoptimized, running circles around most of the researchers on this station." Callum began preparing his workstation, organizing data tablets with the methodical care that had first drawn Ilara's attention. Their research partnership had formed 3 cycles ago, when Callum had requested assistance with Vexillian genetic mapping. Rather than treating Ilara as a walking database, he had engaged with her theories, challenged her assumptions, and, most surprisingly, listened to her ideas with genuine interest. The new cross-species protein synthesis results came in. Ilara said, changing the subject as she always did when discussions veered toward her status. "The compatibility markers between Terran mammals and Arcturian avians show promising alignment. Perfect timing. I've been developing a new genetic mapping protocol that might help us understand the compatibility triggers better." Callum moved closer, his workstation now directly beside hers. "Actually, I was hoping you might help me refine it. Your insights on xenogenetic factors last week were revolutionary." Something warm flickered in Ilara's chest, a dangerous feeling she quickly suppressed. On Vexilius, her homeworld, 0-value citizens were permitted professional interactions but discouraged from forming attachments. Emotional connections were considered wasted on those who couldn't contribute to the genetic future. "I'd be pleased to collaborate," she replied carefully, maintaining professional distance even as she felt drawn to his intellectual energy. Little did either of them know that their collaboration would soon challenge everything both their species thought they understood about the very nature of life itself. Days in the laboratory stretched into weeks, and weeks into months. What began as professional collaboration between Callum and Elara evolved into something neither had anticipated. They developed a routine of working late after Administrator Corville and the other staff had departed, leaving them alone with their research and increasingly with each other. "The cellular membrane adaptation is fascinating," Elara murmured one evening, her silver eyes reflecting the blue glow of the holographic display. "Human cells demonstrate remarkable plasticity when exposed to Vexillian biochemical markers." "That's what first drew me to this field," Callum replied, leaning closer to examine the simulation. His shoulder brushed against hers, a casual touch that would have been unremarkable among humans, but represented forbidden intimacy in Vexillian culture. The ability of different species' biological components to find common ground, despite evolving light years apart. Elara didn't pull away. Perhaps the universe favors compatibility over isolation. Their gazes met briefly, and something unspoken passed between them. That night, over shared nutrient beverages in the station's quiet observation deck, Callum asked the question he'd been holding back for weeks. "Your culture's fixation on reproductive value, has it always been this way?" Elara watched the distant stars through the viewport before answering. "Not always. After the Great Plague nearly exterminated our species, genetic optimization became our salvation. What began as necessity evolved into dogma." She turned to him with a sad smile. "The irony is that I would have been considered highly valuable before the plague. My particular genetic structure was once common among our greatest scientists and artists." "Their loss is my gain," Callum said softly. "If you weren't here, I'd never have discovered half of what we've accomplished together." As station cycles passed, they shared more than research. Callum taught Elara about Earth's chaotic genetic diversity, how humans had rejected genetic determinism after their own bitter history with eugenics. In return, Elara revealed the beauty within Vexillian culture that existed alongside its rigid hierarchies, their art, philosophy, and the ancient belief that all life shared cosmic origins. One evening, as they worked on a particularly challenging genetic sequence, Callum reached for a data tablet at the same moment as Elara. Their hands touched, lingered, and then deliberately intertwined. "This is unwise," Elara whispered, even as her fingers tightened around his. "I've never claimed wisdom as my strong suit," Callum replied, his green eyes serious despite his smile. "But I can't pretend anymore that what I feel for you is merely professional admiration." The kiss that followed defied all Vexillian cultural prohibitions and changed everything between them. Their relationship remained their secret, hidden from judgmental eyes on the station. But in private moments stolen between experiments, they discovered that differences in biology posed no barriers to the language of touch, affection, and eventually, love. What neither realized was that their personal boundary crossing would soon be mirrored in their professional breakthrough, one that would shake the foundations of both their worlds. The day that changed everything began like any other on the research station. Elara arrived early, as was her custom, to prepare the laboratory for the day's experiments. A notification on her console indicated that their request to test a new cross-species genetic compatibility protocol had been approved by the station's ethics committee. "This is it," Callum said when he arrived, excitement evident in his voice. "If our theory is correct, we may have identified the universal genetic bridges that allow for controlled cross-species protein synthesis." The experiment required careful preparation. They worked methodically, setting up the specialized containment field that would allow them to manipulate genetic material from 5 different sentient species, human and Vexillian among them. "Initiating sequence," Elara announced, her fingers dancing across the control panel. The central chamber hummed as microscopic samples of genetic material were exposed to their specially developed catalysts. Administrator Corville had chosen this day to observe their work, his presence adding tension to the lab. "The Vexillian Science Council remains skeptical of your approach, Dr. Reeves," he said, emphasizing Callum's title with subtle mockery. "Though they acknowledge the potential applications if successful. Science advances through challenge, Administrator," Callum replied diplomatically. "Even on Vexilius, your greatest breakthroughs came from questioning established." A sharp alarm cut him off. The containment field fluctuated, its blue glow intensifying to a dangerous brightness. "System overload," Ilara called out, already moving to stabilize the field. "The reaction is accelerating beyond predicted parameters." "Emergency shutdown protocol," Callum ordered, joining her at the controls. The next few seconds unfolded in chaotic slow motion. The containment field collapsed with a flash of energy and a burst of vapor. The automatic safety systems engage, but not before both Callum and Ilara were exposed to the released genetic material and catalysts. Decontamination procedures were immediately initiated. Medical staff rushed to the laboratory, scanning both scientists for potential harm while environmental systems purged the air. Both subjects show stable life signs, the medical officer reported hours later. "Exposure was minimal, and we detect no signs of cellular damage or adverse reactions. Standard observation protocol is recommended for the next 7 days." Administrator Corville, more concerned with the failed experiment than the scientists' welfare, demanded a full report on what had gone wrong. "This setback will require explanation to the Council," he informed them coldly. That evening in Callum's quarters, they reviewed the data from the accident. The energy signature just before the field collapsed. "I've never seen anything like it," Ilara said, examining the readings. "It's almost as if something in the genetic combination became self-catalyzing," Callum mused, "as though the different species' DNA recognized each other on some fundamental level." "That should be impossible," Ilara said, though her scientific curiosity was piqued. "Many things between us should be impossible," Callum replied softly, drawing her close. "Yet here we are." Neither suspected that the impossible had only just begun to unfold within Ilara's body, where human and Vexillian genetic material, exposed to experimental catalysts, had found an unexpected path to compatibility. Ilara knew something was wrong, or perhaps extraordinarily right. 3 weeks after the accident, the symptoms were subtle at first: increased energy requirements, slight changes in her body temperature, unusual sensitivity to certain scents in the laboratory. When she finally accessed the medical scanner in an unoccupied section of the medical bay, she stared at the results in disbelief. Pregnant, with a viable embryo showing both Vexillian and human genetic markers. According to everything known about xenobiology, this should have been impossible. Vexillians couldn't reproduce with other Vexillians who weren't genetically compatible, much less with an entirely different species from another planet. She told Callum that evening, showing him the scan results with hands that trembled slightly. "This changes everything," he whispered, eyes wide with wonder as he studied the image. "Not just for us, for our understanding of life itself." The decision to inform station authorities was made not by choice but necessity. Ilara's physical changes would soon become apparent, and medical monitoring was essential for both her safety and that of the unprecedented life growing within her. The news spread through the station like wildfire, reaching Vexillian authorities before the end of the day cycle. Their reaction was swift and unequivocal. "This aberration must be terminated immediately," declared diplomatic representative Soval during an emergency council meeting. "It represents an uncontrolled genetic experiment and a threat to Vexillian genetic purity." The human delegation vehemently disagreed. "Dr. Veris has the right to bodily autonomy under interspecies charter regulations," argued Ambassador Thorne. "Furthermore, this development represents a scientific breakthrough of immeasurable importance." Ilara and Callum found themselves at the center of a political storm. Vexillian authorities demanded Ilara return to her homeworld for medical intervention. Scientists from dozens of species requested permission to study her condition. Security around the couple was increased as threats emerged from extremist groups on both sides, those who feared what the pregnancy represented and those who saw it as the future. "They're calling our child an aberration," Ilara said one night, her hand protectively covering her abdomen, where a slight swell had begun to show. "And a miracle," Callum reminded her, placing his hand over hers. "Don't forget that part." As weeks passed, medical scans revealed something astonishing. The embryo was developing perfectly, with stable integration of both human and Vexillian characteristics. Most importantly, the genetic defect that had labeled Ilara as 0 reproductive value appeared to have created the very conditions that made this unprecedented compatibility possible. "Your supposed defect isn't a flaw," Callum explained after reviewing the latest analysis. "It's an evolutionary adaptation so advanced that Vexillian science misinterpreted it. Your genetic structure is more flexible, more adaptive than standard Vexillian patterns." Administrator Corval, surprisingly, became an unexpected ally. "The Vexillian Council is demanding your return," he informed Ilara privately. "I have delayed my response. Some questions transcend cultural dogma." But time was running out. Vexillian authorities were sending a diplomatic vessel to retrieve Ilara, with or without her consent. "We leave tonight," Callum announced, entering their quarters with determined stride. "I've arranged transport on a research vessel heading to the Earth colonial outpost on Proxima Centauri V." Ilara looked up from the data pad she'd been studying. At 5 months into her pregnancy, her slender frame now carried a prominent curve that housed their miracle. "How?" "The station is monitoring all departures. We have friends we didn't know about," Callum replied, kneeling beside her. "Administrator Corval has arranged for a medical equipment transfer that doesn't exist. Dr. Niven from Xenobiology will escort us to the shuttle bay under the pretense of an emergency consultation." The escape plan unfolded with precision. As the station's night cycle commenced, Ilara and Callum, disguised in medical technician uniforms, followed Dr. Niven through service corridors rarely used by regular personnel. "The Vexillian diplomatic vessel docks tomorrow," Dr. Niven whispered as they approached the shuttle bay. "Administrator Corval risked everything to arrange this delay. He's been reviewing your research. He believes your child represents the future." "An unexpected ally," Ilara murmured, still processing this revelation. Their transport, a small research vessel named Horizon, waited with engines primed. Captain Jana Orrell, a veteran of the Earth Science Fleet with a reputation for valuing discovery over politics, greeted them at the airlock. "Welcome aboard," she said briskly. "I suggest you get comfortable quickly. We're departing ahead of schedule. Seems there's been a sensor malfunction in this docking bay that will delay the alert about our unauthorized departure." As the Horizon pulled away from the station, Ilara watched through the viewport as the place that had been both her prison and salvation receded into the distance. Callum's arm encircled her shoulders, his presence a constant reassurance. "What happens now?" she asked softly. "We make history," he replied simply. 3 months later, on the thriving Earth colony of New Eden, Ilara gave birth to a daughter they named Nova, a perfect blend of both her parents. She had Ilara's silvery eyes and slight brow ridges, combined with Callum's warmer skin tone and curly hair. Her 10 fingers, 5 on each hand instead of the Vexillian 4, gripped her parents' hands with surprising strength. News of Nova's birth spread throughout known space, impossible to contain. Scientific journals published special editions dedicated to analyzing the implications. Religious leaders from various species debated the spiritual significance. Political alliances shifted as perspectives on genetic determinism were forced to evolve. On Vexilius, a quiet revolution began. Other zero-value Vexillians, inspired by Ilara's story, spoke out against centuries of genetic discrimination. Young scientists began questioning the ancient dogmas, revisiting abandoned research paths that had once suggested greater genetic flexibility within their species. 6 months after Nova's birth, a message arrived from Administrator Corville. The Vixilian Science Council has officially requested collaboration with your research team. Your daughter's existence has forced a paradigm shift in our understanding. There are others like you among our people, individuals whose defects may actually be evolutionary advantages we fail to recognize. The Council extends full citizenship restoration and academic recognition if you choose to return and lead this research. Ilara read the message twice before handing it to Callum. "What do you think?" he asked, bouncing Nova gently in his arms. Ilara looked at her family, the impossible miracle she had never dared to dream of, and smiled. "I think we've already proven that boundaries exist only in our minds." She reached out to touch Nova's cheek. "Perhaps it's time to help others see what we've discovered. That difference isn't deficiency, it's potential." As Nova grew, she became living proof of a fundamental truth that would reshape societies across the galaxy. Life finds connection across even the vastest differences, and what appears as flaws in one context may reveal themselves as strengths in another. The woman once labeled as having zero reproductive value had given birth not just to a child, but to a new understanding of life itself.